Kilted Ballz. It worked. It worked.
I hope I'm coming through. Oh no.
You are. You're coming through. You're fine.
There's not too much minor noise?
Too much is arbitrary. Too much.
Oh, okay.
But yay, we got it down that time. I took a deep breath after I pointed. And I'm like, that'll work.
Oh, well.
Heck yeah. Welcome back, people, to the Kilted Ballz podcast. We're so glad to see you. Hoping you're enjoying the intro. Funny side note today, as I was getting ready to record, I have a visitor, and he was like, oh, what are you guys recording about today? And I'm like, like pork? And he goes, don't you guys like have a script or something, or at least like the basics?
Like, it probably sounds like we do because they're so smooth.
We're so smooth. Yeah. I'm like, nope, we don't.
I mean, occasionally, and the regular listeners may realize, occasionally we have like little games or tricks that we're trying to do.
Yeah.
That could be here or there, so it just depends.
That
I
always.
think those are the happiest, though.
Sometimes I think a lot of people miss the games, but otherwise, bless you. But yeah, and we've had things where we're like, ooh, we've got to talk about like these three things. But in general, we don't have that. And this is our New Year's Eve episode, everybody. This is New Year's Eve. Hopefully you had a great 2024. I made a group of people today. I'm like, go through something you're like happy about or thankful for in 2024, and then give me something you're thinking about for 2025. And that was nice. I liked it.
Oh, that's really cool.
I know, it made me happy hearing what everybody was thankful for. And then I told them, I'm like, and I don't know if this works for people. Maybe I'm just BSing. It's always hard to tell with me. But I told him, I'm like, this is the buyer's lesson for you for 2024. Wow. So this is Ballbuster coming through. I'm like, hey, if you're dealing with anxiety, and like a whole bunch of them were raising their hands, I'm like, every time you start to feel anxiety, think about things you're thankful for or grateful for, you're happy with. I go, your brain can only focus on one thing at a time. I go, brains are not as powerful as you think. So I go, it can either be anxious or it can be thankful. So every time you start feeling anxious, start thinking about what you're thankful for. The anxiety will go away. It can't exist in the same thought pattern. So I'm like, every time I go, you can put all of those doubts and fears to bed if every time they come in, you start thinking about what you're thankful for, and you'll feel better. So
heck yeah.
Well, hopefully that'll work.
Like once you're back into your mindset, you can glance at it. It might be you're confusing anxiety with excitement, and you're actually really excited.
Yes.
And then you can go there.
Yeah.
But for the most part, people just need to change the mindset.
Yep. For sure. Okay. So I said we might be talking about pork. So I'm interested. You put out was it a short, a TikTok? I don't remember. But you said you're going to start going away from pork. So I'm really I'm curious.
It's something I've thought about before, so it wasn't my first touch on it, and it had happened a couple times, like where I've kind of like I've seen all the stuff, and there's rabbit holes, like with anything. I don't know if you can call it a conspiracy theory or just like when people like. Yeah, I mean, let's call it that for lack of a better term.
Okay.
So for me, like, there's people who don't eat pork because for one, they're super smart and people don't want to eat something that's so smart. There is, like you had talked about, in biblical days, because they weren't clean, because they were in the mud and things like that, and trichinosis, which was even a thing, when we were younger.
Yes.
I can remember like learning how to cook breakfast. My mom was like, that has to be cooked all the way because you can get really sick. And so I don't know when it stopped, but definitely in the 80s, it was a thing where like you could still get really sick from not cooking your pork all the way.
Yes, for sure.
So, I mean, that's gone away. There is and I don't know where it stems from. There's there's the theory that maybe pigs and humans, like when, like, some people believe that humans were made from something else because there's the whole missing link thing, and whether you believe it's like it's something from a greater creator, or if it's aliens or whatever you call it, but that pigs are more closely related to human, and that because pigs have a certain amount of human DNA as well, and that's one thing that people don't like about eating them as well. Like, they're too closely related to humans that way. So there's all these different things, and besides the health things, so there's always, but those you got to take with a grain of salt, in my opinion, anyways, because it's like, oh, you can't eat this, you can't eat that, and you can always find both sides to it. But the pork and the smoked meats you usually don't see things where, like, those are really healthy for you. Okay. Like, I love ham, I love salami, like, don't get me wrong, like, my favorite thing is to go, especially up in Lansing, to go get a Jersey Giant. Like, that's one of my favorite things is a really good sub. So it was difficult. Of course, bacon, I love sausage, all of that, but it was funny because it's, like I said, it had touched a couple times, but I'd just never been ready to make that commitment. And my boss, my manager, who I've talked about a couple times, like, he buys into a lot of things, or at least talks about things that I'm very familiar with. And, I think that's a level that we connect on. And the other day the owner was buying pizza for everybody. It was the last day of the work year. And he said, and I ordered a veggie pizza because I don't eat pork. And I was like, oh, is it philosophical, religious? Like, why don't you eat pork? And plus, I know that he's done a lot as far as he used to be a lot bigger guy. Okay. Like a lot of dietary restrictions and things like that. He's come a long ways for himself. But he had talked about the human DNA aspect and that rabbit hole that you can go down, and he just doesn't want to eat something like that. So, and I was thinking about it. I was like, I've been thinking about this for a while. I'm going to do that as well. So I just made the decision.
Nice. It's interesting you talked about the salami and stuff like that. When I told my wife that you were doing it, she's like, oh, because of the processed foods, she goes, I'm like, well, pork doesn't have to be processed. And she's like, yeah, but everything he eats is processed.
Exactly. I mean, I like a good pork chop, don't get me wrong.
Well, as I said, I'm like, pork chops aren't processed. Pork loins aren't processed. She's like, right. But when he's talking about it, he's talking about sausage and bacon and ham, all things that are highly processed, which that does put things in there that could be unhealthy when you are doing that. So the human DNA thing is just batshit crazy. So we'll just put that out there. So
I don't know. There might be something to that, but
no, there's not. It's literally batshit crazy. So, like, the missing link is not like between pigs. And first off, they found the missing links. The missing link is.
I know it's not there. I'm just saying.
Like that's like a
no. There's stuff out there.
There's stuff that science doesn't know, but it ain't that. Like there's stuff science doesn't know, but when you're talking about that species of pig, you can follow the evolutionary track of those animals way, way, way back and way, way forward, and they don't touch humans. Like, the ancestors are so far back, it's just silly. Right? Yeah. And to say that the DNA is similar, it's similar to, like, we laugh about this in class a lot. When you see the stuff about butter and margarine, right? And people are like, oh, margarine is, one step away from being plastic. And I'm like, right. And water is one atom away from being a nuclear bomb. Like, that just shows your level of ignorance in what you're talking about. Sodium, like we talk about this a lot in class, because it's a common frame of reference. But when we're learning all of our ions and our compounds and our elements, we talk about sodium, which is not the sodium all of you are thinking when I said that. Sodium is a white metal that explodes in water. And it's one electron different from the sodium you put on your French fries, which is what people worry about for their heart health. And so that one itty-bitty electron difference, which is not enough to even change the mass of the substance, for any appreciable meaning, that little one electron makes the difference between blowing your mouth off and tasting good. Like, it's totally separate things. So whenever people talk about like DNA, and they're like, oh, I don't, the DNA is like similar. Well, because DNA is proteins. So proteins, that's why we eat pigs. That's why we eat cows. That's why we eat all of that, because we need to break down their proteins into amino acids for our body to build proteins. So yeah, no shit, they're similar because it's still DNA. And it's similar even if you go and grab anything's DNA. Like, proteins are proteins. You know what I mean? And people forget that things like DNA are just proteins. So, yeah, when people go down those conspiracy theories, that's just batshit crazy. Not wanting to eat pork because, like I've said to you before, it's sentient. Like, pigs are highly intelligent, super classic type creatures. That's reasonable. That's reasonable to be like, oh, yeah. It's reasonable to say, listen, they're close to human because it's the same idea, right? Like, oh, we can use pig hearts for our hearts. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you can, right? And you can do lots of things with that because they're in the same, like, evolutionary ladder stage-ish, if you will, as we are, right? We're clearly different. So that feeling of camaraderie, that's cool. Trying to fill it full of bullshit, that's when conspiracy theorists make the wrong step. It's okay for people to say, I feel like those are too human for me. That's why people don't eat dogs in America. They're like, I associate with dogs, I associate with cats, those are bad to eat. And you're not going to eat monkey. Right, and some people do. Right? Or people eat horse. And some people are like, oh my gosh, I could never eat a horse. Because it's how you associate with them. And saying, I associate with horses, I love them growing up, I don't want to eat a horse, is a valid enough reason. You don't have to take it another step and say, well, do you know we share 90% of a horse's DNA? Well, no fucking shit. Right?
Well, what? Wait, in 1984, weren't the pigs walking on 2 feet, or was that the sheep? I can't remember.
I don't know. I do not know. But it brings...
84 Animal Farm, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was Animal Farm. But it's interesting because I've done this to people before, because as most of our listeners know, and if you don't, it's good to explore this, but I am an instigator. Not a good instigator like Lizney Tate's book that she presented to us, but an instigator like more of a, like I push people to think skeptically. Yeah. Like that's my job. And one of the ways I push people is like when they talk about like a pig's DNA or a cow's DNA or a horse's DNA or a monkey's DNA, and they're like, they're so similar to us, which I've already stated doesn't freaking matter. Like, it doesn't matter how similar the DNA is, because it's how you synthesize proteins, FYI, that actually does matter, not the DNA. But I point out to them that if you have Down syndrome, you're way, way, way further away from a human being than an animal would be from a human being.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, my kid with Down syndrome is a real person. I'm like, then don't try to use that argument when you're talking about pigs or cows. Because if that's your argument, then they're not human. They're less than the pig. And I go, but if you're talking about...
more different.
They're more different. But if you're talking about what you should be talking about, which is how we synthesize proteins and all of that kind of stuff, well, then clearly a kiddo with Down syndrome is just like us. And a monkey clearly is not. And a pig clearly is not. Right? Yes. So, that just makes more of a difference. But yeah, I've always said if I was going to give up a type of meat, it would be pork, because pork is so intelligent that it feels wrong. Now, that being said, if people are like, well, why do you still eat pork? Because I am, and it's a very firm part of my belief system, that we are at the top of the food chain, and that's how it is. And I would not be weird and queasy if I ate human either, right? So if I was in the Dahmer party and I was like, yeah, that person just died, we're gonna eat that. I'm starving. I'm gonna eat that meat. I would have no qualms about that, right? Because in my brain, a protein source is a protein source. So, like, it doesn't matter what the protein source is. My body needs to process protein. I need a protein source, right?
Yeah.
And if you're sitting there going, yeah, but you could have beans and nuts. Yep, I eat those too, right? Like,
yeah. I think ultimately it was that, especially with the new job, like my diet has become so much because I'm fasting. Like if I eat at work, I might have some nuts or something. If it's just a weird day, I need something. But really, I'm just eating once a day, and I don't know. Like I said, I just think I was ready because if I come home and I'm eating like a ham and salami sandwich, I'm eating highly processed stuff.
Yes.
Just like, and there's all of that going on. So it's like, okay, if I'm going to be eating once a day, I really need to be paying more attention to what that is.
Hell yeah.
And I think energetically, I was just ready for that. I was ready to take that step of something that I'd been considering for a while. Now, we were at Costco, and I don't know if you saw this short. I made another short earlier where we got the turkey bacon, and it was like, I don't know, it said it was high quality, blah, blah, blah. But it was probably the best turkey bacon I'd ever had.
Yeah.
And Morgan loved it. Ali said it tasted like pig. So I guess that's good.
Well, and we've talked about this. I don't know if we've ever talked about it on the episode, but like I am a true believer in like the protein thing, right? Like in my family, people will be like, yeah, well, why don't you have vegetarian burgers? We do often. We'll have vegetarian burgers. We'll get Impossible Whoppers, probably more than we'll get Whoppers when we go to Burger King. Like we honestly, we use turkey burger more than we use hamburger.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're very we do whatever we want, right? Like we don't. And that's one of the things that I'm always like when people, if you're having weird feelings about something like pork, then that's not a hard thing to take out, right? And it's easy to replace with something else. And like we have a lot of friends, one of my assistant coaches, his religion says he can't eat pork. And so he really tries hard not to eat pork. And I think that's, again, I think the reasons are all valid. Right? Like, that's an okay thing. I also think you don't need a reason. Like, like, I don't feel like I have a need to, I'm doing it because it's a podcast, right? But in general, when I eat, like, I don't feel a need to explain to people why I'm eating or what I'm eating. Like, it's what I'm in the mood for or what the deal is, and I get to decide that because I'm me. Right? Like,
yeah.
I get to choose that. So if tomorrow I chose not to have beef anymore, that's my choice. Right?
Yeah.
But it is funny because whenever you do a change like that, people feel like they need to explain it.
Yeah.
And I often will laugh at people like when they become vegetarian, they're like, so I became vegetarian. I'm like, cool. And then they're like, because, and they like go through this like diatribe, and I'm like, you're dumb. And they're like, you're calling me dumb because I'm going vegetarian? And I'm like, no, I'm calling you dumb because you're going vegetarian for attention. And they're like, I'm not doing it for attention. I go, then why'd you feel the need to explain it? I literally don't care. You know I don't care. Like, people know what I care about and what I don't. Like, people who are around me. So, you know I care very little for why you're doing it at all. You said you wanted to do it. That's good enough reason for me. Right? Like, I don't need you to explain it. And so the fact that you're trying to like defend your vegetarianism tells me you're trying to make an issue of you being a vegetarian. And
there's no issue.
Yeah. And I go, there's no issue. If you want to be, we live in a society today where you can be vegetarian. If somebody's like, I want to be gluten free. Yay. Because I don't need your because. Like, I don't care. Like, just like if you were like, hey, I'm going to start working out. You don't have to tell me it's because you feel like you're out of shape. I know, right? Like, those are things you don't have to explain. If you're explaining it, that means you're trying to explain it to yourself, and maybe you need to do some more soul searching.
Yeah, exactly.
Right about why you're doing it. I don't know.
It's a great decision for you.
Yeah, like, I have no part, like, I have no part of your decision about pork, right? Like, that's...
Well, even like with John, like, he didn't go, I asked him.
Right.
I'm interested, you know.
And I asked you.
And I'd like to hear people's reasonings of why they do things.
Yes. Well, and I asked you, right? because I care about you and your choices, and I wanted to know like what your thoughts were, because you have a really big tendency, and this is why I asked. Whenever you start working or being friends with somebody who is like your level or higher, you start to assimilate their attributes, right? Like that's kind of your like MO. And so I'm like, you're like, I was talking to a friend, and then I'm like, wait, what friend? And you're like, my manager. And I'm like, oh, why are you doing it? Are you doing it because you just saw an alpha male and you're trying to be a good beta male? Or are you doing it because this is something you've thought about and you want to do? And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
No, so, like, yeah. And again, I don't care, right? Like, your choice is your choice. But I was like, oh, I wonder if he's like doing this because his alpha was doing this, right?
So talking about alpha, and we have a friend who is, I would say he considers himself very alpha. And if you remember on our trip, he talked about doing where he does a 7-day fast to start the year.
Yes.
I reached out to him and introduced him to our friend Jason, who does fasts. You know, well, he and I will do fasts together. But he hasn't replied back at all. Like, at all. So I don't know if he's doing it. I think I'm still going to do it. I think I'm going to do a 7-day to start the year.
Yeah, because he sent us a video of his dog and stuff.
Yeah.
Which I thought, I loved that, by the way. It made me so happy. So, Yep. We have that talk a lot in my wrestling sport. I've had to explain that to people a lot of times because, like, they'll come into the room and they'll be like, you know, the guys treat me bad or this and that. I'm like, sure. Or the teachers will be like, why do you have a different, like, reaction from these kiddos than I do? And I'm like, oh, wrestling is a very hierarchical pastime. It's very, they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, it's driven by alpha males. I'm like, so there's clear alpha males, there's clear not, and everybody knows their pecking order because it's a combat thing. I go, it's how it is made. And they're like, so why are they treating me like piss? And I'm like, because you haven't established that you're the dominant male. I go, they see you deferring to me, and so they think, okay, he's not the alpha, where does he fit? And so they attack you subconsciously. They don't know, so they're trying to find it. And I'm like, you have to assert your dominance or don't. I'm like, but they will give you a hard time. They're like, they never give you a hard time. I go, nobody doubts. There's not one kiddo that walks through that door that doesn't know who's the top of the food chain when they enter the room. And it's not because of, like, some of you are like, oh, because, like, you beat on them or... No, it's, like, I don't. Like, I haven't wrestled kiddos in years, really.
Yeah.
But it's my room, right? Yeah. And everybody knows it's my room.
I'm sure.
Huh?
I'm sure there's stories about you that have gone and they get passed down and
now they're legend, right? It's been 25 years now. Those stories are like legend. Yeah, that's exactly true. That's true.
Like, oh, look at what he did to Casey.
Yeah, right. They were talking about me throwing a kiddo across the room the other day. I'm like, man, that was like 15 years ago. I don't know if I could throw a kid, 15 feet across a room anymore. Like, it's hard for me to pick you guys up anymore.
That's hilarious.
But we have that. And like Cora has that. Like, she's little and she's like, they won't follow my leadership. And I keep telling them I'm the leader. I'm like, well, that's your problem. I go, you never tell people you're a leader. She's like, what? I go, people recognize you being a leader. And I go, and you're... She goes, well, but I'm not there to do that. And I go, that's the thing, right? You've got to be there. You got to be doing the hard stuff. They recognize that. And that's what makes you become the leader. So you don't tell people you're a leader. You are the leader, right?
Yeah, that has a little bit to do with, I was going to bring this up, and I'm going to bring it up now. Because it kind of goes along with that. So I think I've talked to you that I was gonna be making a podcast at work.
Yes, Bikes and Biz, that's what it is?
Yep. So talking with John, he's like, I want you guys to make a business inside of a business. And he said that during my interview, and I understood that, and I'm like, cool. Like, if I have that green light, then I have the green light.
Yeah.
So it's something I was debating. I mean, I wanted to learn a little bit more and stuff like that before I really got it going. But something came up this last week where we were, the sales guys were all talking, and the other two have helped me a ton, especially on the motorcycle side of things and learning and what to talk about. But, the one was talking about I'm here, he was saying for him, it's a very much a team effort. And as the salespeople, we are a team. And especially with the other people who aren't there anymore, they're really close with them, still like in group chats and things like that. So they're still almost part of that team, even though they don't work there anymore.
Yeah, right.
So I was thinking about it, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to present this idea because I'm definitely a team player as well.
Sure.
Like I know I can do what I need to do for everything to be great, and I believe that I can do things with people, and we all can be great. And whether other people step up or not, it's up to them.
Yes.
It doesn't have anything to do with me. So I presented my idea in the Bikes and Biz to the other guys like, hey, I'm going to do this. We can all do this together. Because I think even with their personalities and things like that on videos, I think that's beneficial.
Yeah.
Like if somebody is turned on to it and they come into the dealership and it's not just me, they might go to Sam or they might go to Brian. And that I'm fine with that. It's not, but they might catch somebody that I wouldn't catch.
Yeah.
So we decided we're all gonna do it, and we're just gonna. It's our page, so we're doing. Hey, Mormpo, can you step away because I'm recording, bud?
At least he had pants on.
So yeah, I'm super excited about that. It's something we're doing. We're gonna do videos. We're gonna do educational stuff, and. Even like Jason was talking about where, he thinks some of the pictures I'm posting are cool and the bikes are cool, but he's never been around a motorcycle. So he wouldn't know the first thing. So I'm doing, Morgan, get out. So we're going to do things like, this is your first time walking up. Like, what is all this stuff? So is dumbed down, for lack of a better term. Mm-hmm. For everybody, for anyone who is even a little bit interested, and anyone who is watching this and part of our Facebook or my Facebook page, I appreciate it. A bunch of people joined when I sent it out. I just sent a link to everybody. Like, hey, blah blah blah.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And for someone like me, I've been around, but I don't know anything about bikes, right?
Yeah.
No more than I know of anything else mechanical. So I guess I do deal with mechanical stuff. But you understand Yeah. But it's interesting because it's come up a few times in this at Christmas, at Byers Christmas, we were talking, and one of my nephews, my godson, was like, oh yeah, I've got a bike for you. I'm like, you don't have a bike? And he's like, yeah, it's a 100th anniversary edition Indian. And I was like, oh, that sounds awesome. He goes, yeah, it had to be rebuilt once because of an accident, but it's in fantastic shape. And he goes, I wish I could buy it. He goes, they'd probably just give it away to you. They'd give it to you for $100. I'm like, that's amazing. What's the deal? Why don't you buy it if you want it? It's his grandfather's bike, and his grandmother won't sell it to anybody in the family.
Oh, really?
Because she thinks that you shouldn't ride motorcycles. Which my mom always said you can't ride motorcycles. She told all of us, no motorcycles. That's, for me, being one of the youngest, we had a lot of freedom to do whatever the heck we wanted. But that was one thing that she was always like, no motorcycles, no motorcycles. Yeah. So I'm like, oh, she's like that? And they're like, yeah. So she won't sell it to me or my dad. And I'm like, well, then maybe I need to talk to your grandma because I ain't family. And I don't even know. I know I've heard of that kind of bike before, but not enough to be like, ooh. So...
Yeah, so the Indians, one thing people like about the Indians is that when you buy it, everything's been done. There's not a lot of customization, or at least I should say back 20 years ago, that was one of the big differences. You buy a Harley Davidson and you put all this extra money into it to make it like you want it.
Yeah.
And that was one of because the owner of the dealership I used to work at, he had the Ferrari dealership, he had the Chevy dealership. He wanted to buy an Indian dealership, but his brother, my boss, kept trying to talk him out of it because he's like, people like to customize their stuff. They don't want to buy an Indian that's everything's all done and there's nothing that they can do on their own. But I
Right.
wonder what the 100th anniversary is. I was going to look at.
Yeah, I have no idea. Like,
But yeah, I mean they tend to be a little bit of a bigger bike, and like they have the bells and whistles and the bags and all that stuff.
yeah. And I saw you rode your bike. Have you enjoyed it?
Yeah, it was fun. I actually went out with the guys yesterday. We were supposed to record our first episode. We didn't, but we ended up meeting up, and then we went to a restaurant. So the idea for the podcast, besides what we're going to do at the dealership, is that we can record some of our rides. We can put those videos on there. We can go to a place and have a lunch, review the place, and hit like another spot or whatever, and just review different places, like even around town and around in our jurisdiction, and just go from there too, where it's kind of like, where we're providing information. We're not just talking about bikes that we're selling, which, obviously when you're giving of something,
Yeah.
you're more likely to have, more people come in. So that was our idea, but we were going to record, like, just say hi, introduce ourselves, but we just didn't. We ended up talking a bit. But yeah, it was a fun ride. We went there. We went to a place where the owner is a little biker bar, but the owner there, he owns a brewery in Mooresville and a couple other like little bars, and he's behind our bike nights that are in the summertime.
Yeah.
That Tilly, our internet guy, our internet marketing guy, just left. So that was kind of like, that was one of our reasons to go there, and he happened to be there. So it's like, okay, cool. Well, we still have this contact because the sales guys were there talking to him. He knows all of us, and he's like, yeah, have the owner of the company give me a call. It's all good. Like, we're
Nice.
good. Because he does like events at his different establishments too, besides every Thursday night downtown Mooresville,
Nice.
which is in the summertime, which is pretty big. So yeah, it worked out really well. It was fun to, ride with somebody. I'd never ridden with somebody before, in a little group. And I mean, those guys both have hundreds of thousands of miles of experience. So,
And you're a noob.
yeah, mine's mostly riding around the pit when I was.
So is it cause a little anxiety when you first got on because you haven't been on for so long?
No, I would say slightly at first, moving the bikes, because there's all the different shapes and stuff, and like every day almost, if it's decent out, we're moving like the big baggers out, like the big heavy ones.
Yeah.
So at first, just getting used to those, but no, mine is a bit smaller, even though it has bags on it. But
Yeah.
I was already comfortable, after a couple times, like just click back in.
Nice. Like riding a bike. That's the
Riding a
saying.
bike. Yeah.
So you finished, when did you start working there?
The 4th of December, so the first Wednesday of December.
Okay, so in a month, you've sold 3 bikes,
Mm-hmm.
and you're starting a podcast so you haven't recorded.
Mm-hmm.
See, this is what I think people don't realize in general when we're talking about stuff. Like, this is why you are just, like, people in general should just be doers, right? Like, just go do the thing. You don't wait for somebody to tell you. You don't wait for some, like, a lot of times nowadays I hear people going, well, I haven't had training for this, or I don't know how to do this, or, like, you've been there less than a month.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, there's stuff I need to learn, and
yes,
especially
yes.
a couple days off, like I'm watching it. Well, I found like a couple people who are like really big in the Harley YouTube area,
Mm-hmm.
and like watching their videos and what are they doing, and like to have the hundreds of thousands of viewers that they have, so I can emulate that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love it. I came up with a great idea for you. I'm excited, but I can't tell it to you. I think I'm going to have to buy it for you and then tell you. You might get a present because I have a fun idea. But no, I'm super happy with that. I'm excited. I think 2024 has been a good year for us. It's been fun. It's been nice.
Yes. What were some of your like highlights?
You and I, well, maybe more me than you, but we produced 2 journals, right? That was big. I went on that trip with you guys, which was big for me. I don't do a lot of those kinds of things, right? I think there's just like things that were getting done, and I think there's more fun things to do. Like I was out in my barn today, I had to go get something. I'm like, I need to attack this barn, right? And I'm just like, there's things like I'm like, ooh, I just need to focus on and do the thing. And so stuff like that I think have been awesome. I think the family has been great. I feel like, honestly, it seems like every month the family gets closer. Like, it's weird because they're starting to go their separate ways.
Yeah.
But it's also like we're getting closer and closer each time. So it's just an interesting dichotomy, but I like it. So that's awesome. So yeah, lots of good things. What about you? Year-end in review?
I mean, definitely, I made this comment before, but our trip was definitely a highlight of my year. Like, super, super awesome. And besides my own stuff, which I was like, remember we talked about the every other month doing something new.
Yes,
like,
yes.
I did that for myself, and I tried to do that as the family. And we were successful at that. Every other month, every 8 weeks in that time frame, we did something new as a family. And it tended to be like go somewhere we'd never gone or do something we haven't done. And it was just a lot of fun. It's things, like you said, it's bringing us closer together. We're not going through the same old, and not necessarily like, you know, a couple things were planned where you're looking forward to it, but a lot of it is spontaneous where it's just like, oh, this is awesome. We're having a great time.
So for a present, and it kind of ties right into this, one of my sisters, the one who listens all the time, she got me, it's like a Michigan Adventure pack of cards. And I didn't realize it at first. Like, I looked at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. And, you know, like, sometimes my eyes are bad, and it was like late at night, and I was like, oh, it looks like cards, and you pick it out and you go have an adventure in Michigan or whatever. But I was looking at it, they're scratch-offs.
Oh, really?
So I think you pull it up and scratch it off, and then that's the adventure you do. And so there's 50 of them.
Nice.
So I'm like, oh, that's going to be exciting. I'm excited to do them and like share them like with the podcast. Like, oh my gosh, here's what I did this weekend or whatever. We like scratched off a card, and you know.
What's going to be super awesome is how many have you already experienced?
Yes.
Like if one is like Mackinac Island or something like that.
I'm still going to say we have to do it.
Absolutely. But it'll be cool to see how many, like, these are 50 things that someone came together and said are the best things to do in Michigan, and I've already done
25. I had to keep scratching until I found a new one. Yeah, we'll find out. I'm pretty excited. The other thing that goes along with this, as people start the new year, one of the things that you did last year, and we've talked about, is you do the whole year calendar. And I was laughing, and I think we said this in one of the podcasts. It's weird for me because, and I realize this is probably why I don't set New Year's resolutions either. My year tends to go like September to September or June to June. Tends to be how I visualize a year. And I realized a few weeks ago, and I meant to bring it up, and so I will now, I always have yearly calendars.
Yeah.
Because we always have to plan the entire year. So I have, I don't know, like 50 year-long calendars, but they're always like July to July, right? Like a fiscal calendar, not the new year calendar. So I'm always going by like kind of the business fiscal calendar, not the normal calendar. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've always done year-long calendars.
That's awesome.
I just never realized it.
I got another one. Oh, here, my one.
Well, and I don't do them as much anymore, so it made me think I'm going to have to start hanging these up and doing them. Yeah, there it is.
Like, you know, I wrote different colors for different things. You can see some I kept up with, some I didn't, but I was super happy to keep up with those couple things that I talked about that were, you know.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I love it. I think it's great.
Something that defined the year, and then also doing something new every other month.
Heck yeah. Well, people, we've about used up our time. We hope you had a great 2024. We thank you for spending some of 2024 with us. I hope you guys all knock 2025 out of the park and, you know, make it completely awesome and make it your own. We will, and we're excited to share it with you. We would love it if you shared it with us, either in the comments or on Twitter or on Facebook or on TikTok, wherever you do it. We'd love to hear some of the cool things you're doing, things you're grateful for in 2024, and as things go on into 2025, right?
Yes.
That'd be fantastic. So anyway, you guys are awesome. We're so thankful for you, and this is Ballbuster signing off.
Dragon Jared, love you all.